Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, what offseason questions did the Timberwolves playoff performance really underscore and highlight for us? What's the biggest decision the Timberwolves will have to make this offseason? It's all upcoming. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Happy Friday, everybody. Happy weekend. And I guess happy offseason. It's not happy that it is the offseason, but hey, there's a lot of stuff to look forward to here. We're within 3 weeks of the draft now, or I guess just under 4 weeks from the draft. There's obviously free agency, lots of Wolves questions. And really, that's what I want to do today. This isn't like a full offseason preview. It's a little bit of a kind of a half postmortem and what the postmortem of the playoffs, at least, and I guess the season, but the recency of everything that happened over the last 6 weeks or so in the playoffs, what that means as we look ahead to the offseason and what kind of questions are there surrounding the roster, the assets the Timberwolves do have as we head into the summer. So a lot to get to on the show today. We'll also set up what we're going to do over the next few weeks here on Locked On Wolves. A big thank you off the top for making this show your first listen every day. Of course, you can listen to Locked On Wolves anywhere. You can also watch on YouTube, and a reminder that you can also download the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV, and you can watch Locked On Wolves there as well. All right. So any typical offseason guide would tell you hey, here's the draft picks the Wolves have, here's who's free agents, et cetera. We're going to hit all that. But again, what I think is most relevant right now is the way the Wolves have exited the playoffs the last couple of years. What does this tell us about what's most important for the offseason for Minnesota? What's highlighted? What is underscored based on the playoff performance? And I mentioned last year as well, obviously things have changed over the past 12 months since the Wolves were eliminated by Dallas in the conference finals a year ago. But some of the same question marks still exist. For instance, and actually let's just start here before we get to some of the more roster specific ones. In terms of an actual need on the roster, the secondary playmaker, secondary creator is still a real thing that this team needs. Remember last season, we saw the offense bogged down at times in the second round against Denver, but really against Dallas and the length and athleticism of Dallas and their ability to make life difficult on Ant and contest three-pointers and be athletic and long enough to get out and contest at the three-point line. That was an issue. It was an even bigger issue against Oklahoma City because the defense was completely tilted towards Anthony Edwards. Julius Randle really struggled in basically 4 of the 5 games, I believe, in the conference finals. And OKC did a better job, far better job than any other team, Golden State and LA in the playoffs, at least, of limiting Julius Randle. There needs to be somebody else in the backcourt besides Anthony Edwards that can create for others, that can put pressure on a defense and can bend a defense in a way that it can't completely be loaded up on Anthony Edwards. And the biggest difference, completely oversimplifying, but the biggest difference at a surface level between the Thunder and the Wolves on the offensive end of the floor for each respective team in the conference finals is what Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren were able to do compared to what Julius Randle was not able to do for the majority of the series, save for the Game 3 blowout win. And frankly, Jaden McDaniels was good, not as good as he was in the first 2 rounds. He was good over the course of the series, good-ish. And he turned into the third option, but the veterans in Mike Conley and Rudy Gobert, not that anybody was expecting them to carry a scoring load, they this year were more floor raisers than anything else, which is important, to be clear. They still each have roles on this team. They're both very likely to be on the team next season. But in the playoffs, you need more than a floor raiser. You need somebody who can break through and do something impactful with the ball in their hands. And Chet Holmgren and J-Dub did that for Oklahoma City. And the Wolves, role players, Nickeil Alexander-Walker was bad in Game 5, but he was really good before that. He had a couple 20-plus point games. He was good. You could put Jaden in that category, I guess. Nas was a little bit up and down. Those guys were just as good offensively as Oklahoma City's kind of ancillary pieces. It was the secondary stars for the Thunder that were better. The Wolves don't have that. And they don't even have not only that, but Mike Conley, the offense operates much better with Conley on the floor, and that was true throughout the season and in the playoffs too. I think that surprised a lot of national observers. but how Mike Conley greases the wheels of the Timberwolves offense, that's a real thing. But he's also not a true threat to score. Like, teams know maybe once a game, if that, he's going to try and get to the rim and shoot a layup. Like, besides that, he doesn't even probe that much, right? He's mostly passing on the perimeter. He's catching, shooting threes and shooting off the dribble and transition. And he's good at all those things, but he's not bending the defense. So after last offseason, the answer was, let's trade up for Rob Dillingham. I think he was number 8 in the draft. Like, let's get into the lottery, which nobody was expecting, yours truly included, to get Rob Dillingham as a guy who could be like a Lou Williams-esque, Jamal Crawford-esque type kind of, water bug of a guy off the bench. And that obviously didn't really completely pan out in any way. I don't want to get into like how the Timberwolves handled him for year one. I think it's a bit of a fool's errand to try and parse that anyway, because nobody knows exactly what the day in and day out looks like for a guy like that outside of the walls of the team and those at Mayo Clinic Square and everybody. Like, what level of growth did Rob Dillingham show in the film room, on the practice floor, in the weight room, right? Like, what's the work ethic? Like, some of that stuff that we don't really know the answer to. So it's hard for me to like really dig in on, man, Chris Finch didn't play him enough. Should he have played him? Could he have played him a little bit more early in the season, depending on the situation, depending on the opponent? Yeah, I think so. There were some opponents that I thought Dillingham should have played against, just matchup wise. And Chris Finch was a little too beholden to an 8.5 man rotation. Like, by the time Joe Ingles was out of the rotation, which was like a month into the season, if not before that, there was a brief period. We'll talk about Josh Minot as well. Like, there's a brief period where Minot was in it. He lost the opportunity to be in the rotation. Jalen Clark ultimately took the bull by the horns there when he was ready to play and cleared to play. But I think there were some opportunities in there, depending on the matchup, where it was like, all right, well, why couldn't we have given Dillingham a little bit of run here? I think that that's true. I also think that it's silly to sit here and think that, like, oh, if Rob Dillingham had played more, this would have been different. No, he still was a 19-year-old rookie that was 164 pounds when he was drafted, right? Like, would he have made a big difference against the Oklahoma City Thunder, regardless of how much he played in the regular season? Probably not. Is he the guy to make a difference moving forward? Could he be that impactful next year? It's entirely possible. That is the role that he is designed, that he is supposed to play, right? The reason they drafted him is exactly what they still need. So the big question coming into the offseason, aside from and we're going to talk about Randle and Nas and Alexander Walker and all the guys who could leave in free agency, the number one priority is finding somebody else who could put pressure on a defense, ideally off the dribble, but also is a good shooter. And Rob Dillingham checks those boxes. Also ball handling, right? Getting into the teeth of the defense. Anthony Edwards is the only guy on this team that consistently will probe and has the ability to pass. And like, he improved dramatically when it came to creating for others and distributing the ball, but he's obviously not a pure point guard. He should be looking to score first. And we saw the assist rate improve. We saw it in the playoffs as well in that performance where he was getting ripped for not scoring enough. But I think it was game 4, the close game, when he had like 19 points, but he also had 6 assists. And I thought he made all the right plays. Like, those types of performances are encouraging when it comes to Anthony Edwards, but you need to have another guy that can do that, where then Ant can be off the ball and Ant can catch and shoot, or Ant is dribbling and driving and he can kick it out, and Rob Dillingham or whoever could catch and shoot. We talked about how good Dillingham was in college as a catch and shoot player from the perimeter. He could be that guy. That's the whole idea behind the Rob Dillingham trade up and draft pick last year, is that he should check all of those boxes. The only thing is he's very small. And I thought he competed pretty well defensively. I think Chris Finch mentioned that as well in his exit interview, that he thought Dillingham actually showed strides defensively over the course of the season. He wasn't a good defender. We didn't think he would be, but he competed, and it seemed like he learned on that end. The offensive side, there's such a high ceiling for Rob Dillingham. And whether it's him or it's somehow another acquisition, like there's all these fake trades flying around out there with other guys that they could get potentially, which obviously any trade is tough to pull off these days with the second apron and the cap and the Wolves having what's nearly a full roster and everything anyway. But if it's not Rob Dillingham, it's got to be somebody. And we're going to talk about Nickeil Alexander-Walker's potentially pending free, or not potentially. He is an unrestricted free agent this summer. We'll talk about that. But the Wolves do need that secondary creator, secondary scorer that can truly put pressure on a defense. Is Dillingham that guy? I don't know the answer to that. But the playoffs underscored the fact that it needs to be someone. I want to kind of finish that conversation, and then we'll kind of shift into the guys with player options, and then Alexander Walker as an unrestricted free agent. We'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at DoorDash. NBA fans, you know what time it is. It's still playoff season. There's still 3 teams kicking in the NBA playoffs. That means big performances and even bigger rewards. DoorDash is bringing the heat with the slam dunk deal for DashPass members during the 2025 NBA playoffs. It's called They Swish, You Score. Anytime a player drops 50 or more points in a playoff game, DashPass members score a free 3-piece crispy tenders combo from Wingstop the very next day. Just place an order of $20 or more. Use the code Wingstop50 at checkout, and that combo is yours. Crispy, delicious, and totally free. Offer valid noon to midnight the day after the game. Terms apply. I don't know what your go-to move is after an epic game, but if Jalen Brunson or Karl Anthony Towns drops a 50-piece this weekend to keep the Knicks season alive and force a Game 7 in that series, absolutely. The go-to move is the next day. Grab your DoorDash order for Wingstop. Here's the play. Sign up for DashPass to unlock this and more exclusive deals all season long. When any player scores 50+ in a playoff game, DashPass members can grab a free 3-piece crispy tenders combo from Wingstop the next day with a $20 or more order and code Wingstop50. That's Wingstop50. That's DashPass, your door to more savings, more flavor, and more ways to win. Terms apply. All right. So related to the Dillingham thing, are there other options on the roster, potential options to fulfill that role? Probably not. I mean, Terrence Shannon Jr. is more likely to, like, Nickeil Alexander-Walker in theory was supposed to be that guy. And I do think he's better off the dribble than certainly better than I gave him credit for before the season. I do not think he's a long-term solution there. I don't think you can get into the second apron to keep Alexander-Walker and believe he's going to be that guy, because that was the problem this year, right? He had moments where it looked good. He had an off the dribble 3 in I think it was the Game 3 win. That was really, like, he could do that. He could shoot threes off the dribble. But I think that was some of the issue early in his career as a first-round pick. His teams wanted him to be a more aggressive scorer, to be a scoring combo guard, essentially, was the idea. But he was miscast in that role, and he wasn't efficient offensively, and I think he was trying to do too much, early with the Pelicans and the Jazz early in his career before getting to Minnesota. And now he's been more appropriately cast as a 3-and-D guy who can be that backup point guard in a pinch. And with the way the Wolves were constructed and with Dillingham not getting playing time, they were always in a pinch in which Nickeil was the backup point guard. And I think that's not his best role. And I don't think the Wolves should bend over backwards to keep him if they believe, if they're unable to do it otherwise, right? Like, between the 3, and again, we're going to talk about this, but between Nickeil, Naz Reid, and Julius Randle, you're not going to keep all 3. Can you keep 2 of the 3? Probably. And if Randle opts out and tries to get more money elsewhere, which is tough considering how few teams have cap space, or maybe Naz does the same thing and you can't keep one of those guys, then fine, bring back Nickeil, because he's an outstanding bench player. I still believe the Wolves had the best 6, 7, 8 guys in the entire NBA. Even if it was uneven in the playoffs for all 3 of them, they're awesome. And the Wolves, Chris Finch loves Nickeil Alexander-Walker. It'd be great if he was back. But he isn't the guy that you bend over backwards to keep, because that role should be somebody that can initiate a little more offense. And that's part of the reason why I don't think the answer is currently on the roster, unless it's Rob Dillingham. TJ Shannon probably gets that rotation spot if Nickeil walks and goes somewhere else, because remember, Alexander Walker is an unrestricted free agent. He only made $4.3 million this year. He's going to get, the mid-level exception for a non-tax-paying team is like $16 million for next year. Somebody's going to pay Nickeil that, and that's 4 times what he's making this year almost. So, is it TJ Shannon? Maybe. TJ Shannon is not initiating for others. Like, he didn't really do that at Illinois either. He was a high volume scorer. He was a volume 3-point shooter with unlimited range. He's an absolute terror, a demon in transition, like amazing in transition, a really good defender. I think he's got the upside to be almost as good as Nickeil defensively. He's obviously a wider body, a stronger body. I don't think quite as long from a wingspan standpoint. Remember, he's only a couple years younger than Nickeil. He was a 5-year college player. He was like 23 when he got drafted last year. So age-wise, TSJ is he's not old. Or, he is old. He's not exactly inexperienced from an age standpoint. From a playing high-level college basketball standpoint, he's just inexperienced at the NBA level. And I think he's pretty plug-and-play, as we saw in the playoffs. But he's not a creator for others. He's not going to be the guy that in the half court is getting into the teeth of the defense to then have the ability to pass. Whereas Rob Dillingham, well, he is a shoot first point guard, quote unquote. He also he is a point guard. He's going to distribute to others. He's going to facilitate offense for others. I don't think TJ Shannon is necessarily going to do that. Doesn't mean he's not a rotation piece. I think he is. He's just not that guy that's going to make life that much easier for Ant. He's more like, he's a true six man. Put him in. He'll average 12, 13 a game. He'll score a bunch of transition. He'll hit a three. He'll dunk on someone. He'll get an and one. He'll get a pick six going the other way. Like, that's the vibe that TJ Shannon brings. And it's vital. It's important. He should be in the rotation, but he isn't the break down the defense, create for others. And, he can score in the half court. I do think he can. We've seen it a little bit in small doses so far, but I don't think he's initiating the half court for others. So I don't think the answer is on the roster. And Dante DiVincenzo, in theory, could be that guy. We saw him average, 16 a game or whatever with the Knicks last year. I don't think realistically, like, teams aren't worried about Dante scoring off the dribble. They just aren't. Can he do it? Yeah. Can he beat some guys one-on-one? Yes. Is he a great three-point shooter? Normally, yeah. But he's not what the ceiling of Rob Dillingham is. He's not, like a true secondary creator for himself or for others in the way that the Wolves need him to be, or need that guy to be. So I don't think the answer is on the roster unless it is Rob Dillingham. And that relates to the Nickeil question, because Nickeil could get more money elsewhere. It doesn't make sense to keep Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I know Chris Finch said, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the press conference stuff from the exit interviews that took place on Thursday. I know he said that they want to keep everybody. Like, of course he said that. That's the right play. Everybody says they want to be back because that's also, within reason, that's the right play. I think, everybody wants these guys back. It'd be awesome if he was. It's going to be hard, especially given everything else you need to do with that roster spot. Related to that, Julius Randle and Naz Reid both have player options. A week ago, I would have told you Julius Randle's for sure opting out because he was playing so well in the playoffs. I don't think 4 bad games over the course of a week and a half is necessarily going to change that. What probably changes it is if you look at the landscape of who has cap space, it's basically the Brooklyn Nets. But a lot of stuff could happen, right? Like, Randle could opt in and he could try and get an extension. I don't think the Wolves extend Julius Randle. I think that's a more likely outcome for Naz Reid. Either one of them could decline the player option, become free agents, and still come back on a new contract. Or they could opt in and then either they don't want to extend or the Wolves don't want to extend and they play in an expiring contract. In fact, I would say at this stage, it feels like the most likely scenario is both Naz and Randle are back. Randle would be on opting in, expiring contract, and Naz would be an extension of some sort, knowing that he's probably, and he said he would be open to doing this in his exit interview, he'd be open to being the sixth man again. If the Wolves keep Randle, he opts in and they don't extend him, Naz probably comes off the bench again in year one. But if he signs a longer term extension, then he becomes a starter when Randle leaves next summer of 26 in free agency, or if the Timberwolves trade him. I think that's an entirely feasible scenario too, is Randle opts in and the Wolves trade him. The opt-in deadline is, it's like the Friday after the NBA draft. I think it's June 29th is the date. So he could opt in. The Wolves could turn around and trade him in July. They could trade him in August. They could trade him in September like they did with Karl-Anthony Towns last year. That is on the table. Absolutely. And I think once it's all said and done, once free agency, maybe once we get past that and teams are like, all right, well, how do I improve my team now? There could be a team that says, look, we're trying to go from a 35-win borderline play-in team to a 40-win, 43-win playoff team. Julius Randle could get us there, right? Like, all it takes is one team to have that interest, and the Wolves could then maybe recoup some of the draft assets that they don't have currently for the next few years because of all the trades they've already made. So that's an entirely feasible solution. In fact, sitting here right now, if I had to, there's obviously so many possible like permutations of what could happen here. My prediction is both opt in, Naz is extended, Randle's not, and I think he's ultimately traded, whether that is sometime later this summer or if it is before the deadline next year, if things go off the rails. Like, I think that is the path we're headed, and I think Nickeil goes elsewhere. And then Minnesota is going to have to bring in somebody else, a veteran. Obviously the Joe Ingles roster spot is going to open up. The Nickeil roster spot opens up. Then there's decisions on Luka Garza and Josh Bynum at basically vet minimum type salaries for extensions, or not extensions, for team options. I think it's fair to assume they're both back. I mean, who knows, especially with Minot, like maybe not. There's more time to talk about him later another day, but they'll bring in a couple more guys in vet minimum type deals. And maybe there's a rotation guy there somewhere, but I think the plan would be Terrence Shannon Jr. / Rob Dillingham. You hope Dillingham can take the reins when it comes to that backup point guard creator role, and that TJ Shannon forces you to have a 9-man rotation. And Chris Finch said that. I think it was even post game on Wednesday night after they were eliminated. He said we should look at lengthening the rotation. That's almost verbatim, or I should take a look at lengthening the rotation or something like that. That makes me think that both Dillingham and TJ Shannon, he's thinking, are in the rotation next year. Sitting here right now, if you're penciling in your opening night rotation for October, it's probably both of those guys that are in the rotation, and it's a 9-man group, depending on what happens in the draft and obviously free agency. But I think they both are kind of breaking down the door to try and bust into the rotation, or Dillingham needs to be, again, for all the reasons we've already listed. I want to talk quickly about assets for the, what's available, what's in the Wolves cupboard for the offseason from a draft standpoint. And we'll kind of peek ahead at the next couple of weeks, and that's how we'll close the show. All right. So as we already identified, headed into the offseason, Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Joe Ingles are the only unrestricted free agents that the Timberwolves have. The others, there could be another spot with the Josh Minot team option, which I believe that deadline is also like the Friday after the draft. Yes, it is. Same with Luka Garza. They both could be the team. It's up to the team whether they bring them back or let them go. I feel like either one could go either way. If I was a betting man, I'd say they keep them both, because 2.1 for Josh Minot's not a bad number for a team that's capped out, and there's still something there. And again, more on that another day. Of course, there's the two-way slots. Those guys are all restricted free agents: Jesse Edwards, Bones Highland, and Tristan Newton. And then from a draft standpoint, the Timberwolves actually have two really good picks in this draft. They have the number 17 pick, which they got in the Karl-Anthony Towns trade. It was a protected Pistons pick. The Pistons were better than I think probably anybody expected. So the Wolves now have the 17th pick in the draft. More to come on. I did a selection for Locked On NBA for the mock draft, so we'll talk about that later. The Wolves also have the number 31 pick, which is the first pick of the second round, which is an extremely valuable pick. And they got that in the gift that keeps on giving, the D'Lo Mike Conley trade from like 2+ years ago. They got yet another second round pick, and it ends up being the best pick in the second round. What I kind of think is going to happen here, if the Wolves, I think they're going to wait until draft night for several reasons, but my guess is they'll have a target at 17, a couple of targets maybe. If that guy's not there, they're going to trade 31. Let me say that a different way. If the guy is there, I said that backwards. If the guy they want is there, or one of the guys they want is there at 17, I bet they trade 31 for a future, some sort of protection on it, but a first-round pick. Because remember, the Wolves only have like one pick in the next 7 drafts after this one. I know they've had first-round picks now in 3 of the last 4, and everybody thought they wouldn't after the Rudy trade, but they just keep having their picks. Now they don't have them for like 6 of the next 7 years, and 31 is such a valuable pick. I bet they could get a future, probably not unprotected pick, but probably like a lottery protected pick or something from somebody who wants the first pick of the second round. Because remember, those aren't guaranteed contracts, and it's literally the best pick of the second round. And so you could take, it used to be kind of a draft and stash, a foreign player. That's happening less now. But it's a valuable pick. You could do whatever you want with it, especially with the 2-way contracts now. So a lot to like about that selection. I think the Wolves don't need 2 rookies. I mean, they already have inexperienced guys that haven't broken into the rotation. Obviously, Dillingham and Shannon, who were rookies last year. Then on top of that, Jalen Clark, who I haven't even mentioned. I was talking about a 9-man rotation, not mentioning Jalen Clark. Like, he could very easily be part of the rotation as well. And you still have Josh Minot. And you still have, there's other of these young guys on the roster, and you don't need 2 more rookies. So my guess is if somebody that they like is there at 17, they take that pick and they kick the 31 pick down the road. They trade it to somebody else and they get a future first, which makes a lot of sense. If they don't get somebody they like at 17, they might just trade that pick and pick at 31 in this year's draft. They could kick the 17 ahead to a protected future first-round pick. Those picks on draft night, they're both going to have a lot of value. And so I think it's probably a wait and see. I don't think it's a package to trade up in this particular draft. I think it's pretty unlikely. they traded up last year and the guy didn't play very much in Dillingham. So very interested to see how this all plays out. But those are two really nice picks to have, a couple of really nice chips for Tim Conley in the front office to play. So curious to see what they ultimately decide as we get closer to the draft. Of course, as we mentioned, anywhere from 2 to 4 open roster spots to fill with the draft and free agency. And we'll talk about, like, do the Wolves have an exception? Some of that stuff once we look at the free agent class. There just isn't much out there that that the Wolves are really gonna be able to get in free agency from a cap space standpoint, but also just there aren't that many options in free agency that you'd want to sign. So there's a lot to kind of dig in on there. But the biggest thing, of course, is the Nas player option, the Randle player option, the Nickeil Alexander-Walker unrestricted free agency, and then the really kind of inability for the Wolves to do anything beyond that. Pretty curious to see how this all turns out. What we're going to do over the next couple of weeks. Next week, we're going to do player reviews. And so there will be some offseason talk in terms of looking ahead that we'll do as we go through the roster, because we'll do an outlook for each player. I'll probably spend Monday, Tuesday doing kind of sort of the end of the roster. We'll do like a segment and a half on each guy. And then by the end of the week, we'll be into the rotation guys, the starting lineup. We'll do half shows on some of the rotation guys and probably full shows on Anthony Edwards and Jaden McDaniels, and obviously the starters overall. Probably have a couple of guests to dive a little bit deeper on that and get through that probably middle part of the week after next. Once we get into the second week of June, we'll be within 2 weeks of the draft, so we'll turn a lot of attention to that and start looking at what the rest of this offseason looks like, as well as some kind of overall season review type things. Big picture, like my predictions, how did this all turn out? So we'll mix some of that in next week as well as we go through. And of course, if there's any news, Timberwolves ownership news, that should be finalized in June. If there's anything free agency wise, we'll cover all that on the show as well. And of course, keep an eye on the NBA finals too. All right. That's all I got for you today here on the show. Big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. A reminder that for your second listen, as you gear up for the NBA draft, you can listen to the Locked On NBA Big Board show. NBA draft expert Rafael Barlow reacts to every workout, interview, and rumor leading up to the NBA draft. Find Locked On NBA Big Board on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.